Hey, Andrew Morrison here, giving you a little update from the second meeting that we had at the Building Codes Division for the Tiny House Code Committee. It was a really exciting day. We got a lot accomplished. Originally we were going to have 3 days of hearings and testimony and all that kind of stuff, and we got it done in 2. So we're very excited about how quickly we were able to move through. So to give some context of where this is going, we are the Code Committee, which gives recommendations to staff of BCD, which is the Building Codes Division. So Building Codes Division will now take what we recommended, filter through that, either accept our recommendations, reject them, make changes. We don't know exactly how it'll play out, but we're very comfortable with what we put forward as our recommendations. And again, this committee had builders, fire marshals, building inspectors, lots of different people on there, and we got some really good information put forward. So in addition to what happened last time, I don't know if you remember, if you haven't seen the video, we posted a video about the first meeting. Basically in that one, we moved right off the bat unanimously to adopt Appendix Q into the Oregon State Code, which is very exciting. We also have some notes here so I can keep track of everything. We also addressed the Energy Code. So we've made some changes in the Energy Code. Again, these are as recommendations. So we've changed things to an R15 wall, which it used to be an R21. The roof used to be R49, we've changed that to R30. The floor is R25, it used to be R38. So what this does is it lowers the requirements on the insulation value because of energy usage. Our energy usage is so much lower than large houses. We're able to try to negotiate some of these numbers down. This will give people the option of using more natural materials for their insulation, sticking with thinner 2x4 walls, lowering and thinning out the ceiling assembly. Again, so we can keep as much space inside the tiny home as possible. So very exciting with that. The other thing is we tied it back into, there's an exception that talks about if it's an addition, a 600 square foot addition or 200 square foot addition, what's possible for you. So we're tying that back into our tiny house code as well. So basically, when you're doing a prescriptive path for your energy, you have to look at, you're meeting the R values in the walls and ceilings and windows and all that sort of stuff, U values in windows and doors. And then you have to also pick 2 things from 2 different tables. So you could add extra insulation in your walls, or you could choose triple glazed windows or different augmentations to make that energy code even tighter. So we've actually, with that additional, based on additions, the 600 or 200 square foot additions, we're putting tiny houses into that same column, which says we only have to pick 1 item out of those 2 tables. We don't have to pick 1 out of each. We can pick 1 total out of both of those, so that helps us with our energy as well. We did address the issue of fire sprinklers. The fire marshal and the building officials, pretty much everyone on that committee, really wanted to see fire sprinklers in every structure that we build, every tiny house structure that we build. Now, they're not required in Oregon in 1 or 2 family dwellings, so I was kind of pushing back, well, if we don't have to have them here, but we do have to have them here, doesn't that become punitive? So it went to a vote, we pushed it through, I voted against it. What we ultimately ended up doing was making some changes to it to make it a little bit more acceptable. So you don't have to use sprinklers if you have no loft. As soon as you put a loft into a tiny house in the state of Oregon, you're going to have to include some sprinkler systems. Now the reason for that is, according to the fire marshals and building inspectors, they don't see, well, it's not that they don't see, there is no provision within the code for a loft and ladders and things like that in a regular house. So they're concerned about egress, emergency egress from those spaces. So they said as a trade-off, if you have a loft, you have a sprinkler system. It buys you more time to get out of the house. It's actually a very good idea. The concerns with it that were raised were around cost. How much is this going to cost? Is it going to add to the house? And the projections look like it could cost anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, depending on if you have to be off-grid with a separate tank and all these sort of things. So that can become challenging for a lot of people. A lot of that cost is in either the separate tanks or in the SDCs, the system development charges that the city or town might charge you. So we've put back in our recommendations that legislation needs to be put in place that addresses this, that for tiny houses that we have to scale our SDCs. So if you have a 3,000 square foot house, it's going to cost 10 grand for your SDCs. It shouldn't be 10 grand if you have a 200 square foot house. It should scale down. So we've recommended that they do something with that as well. We also put forward that you only have to do a single head hydronic hydronic calculation. So how much water is required, basically. The basic system in the code right now, which is the NFPA 13D code, which is what they were originally pushing us to approve to, that requires a 2-head calculation, which is quite a bit more expensive. So we've brought it down to a 1-head. The idea that it still might have 3 or 4 sprinkler heads, but only 1 is the water calculation size. And by doing it that way, we lower the size of the water line coming in, and we can hopefully maintain the same water size that you would have to have for a regular construction, so you're not boosting that up to the next meter size, which causes, again, a lot more cost in the SDCs. So we think that's good. We also talked about some flame spread details, so how to stop fire in small spaces, obviously very important in a tiny house. Things like under cabinets. If you have an under cabinet that's exposed wood right next to a stove, that could burst the cabinets into flames because they're closer. So you have to do some fire protection, like using drywall or some other material on there to inexpensively protect those areas, which I also think is a great idea. Definitely made it very, very clear, and we put in our recommendations to staff that they put a very clear clause in this I guess it's a code language at this point, that says that we are not addressing RVs, and that anything we do in the Oregon Residential Specialty Code side of things only addresses houses. So if you have a tiny house RV, that's not addressed in what we're doing here. And we're trying to create some clarity because the DMV and the Building Codes Division and quite frankly, most of the individuals who are looking to build tiny houses in the state of Oregon are confused. And this is true we're seeing across the nation, where people are using the term tiny house to describe everything from park model RVs to tiny houses that are movable to tiny houses that are on foundations. And that's causing a lot of confusion in the industry. So the building officials and the people on the committee were all saying, well, everything's a tiny house, so that causes a problem. If we start getting into the concept of what's an RV and what's a tiny house, how do we know the difference? Because everyone calls them tiny houses. So I said to them, look, Gabrielle and I put together an infographic that shows exactly what we are and what we are not. And it's super important that that word gets out there. We have to stop using tiny house across the board. It's hurting our chances of getting legal tiny houses. We have to differentiate what's a tiny house RV and what's a tiny house. So you can check out the infographic that we made, and please share that around. What else? We discussed the possibility of DIY builds for movable tiny houses and what some of the challenges are to that. It was beyond the scope of what we were charged with doing in our committee, so we couldn't actually put recommendations forward. But the recommendation that we did make is that Building Codes Division needs to address it. There's a hole in the code right now that does, because we're not dealing with movable tiny houses. So we've asked them to look into that, and hopefully we'll have another committee reconvene and address that issue as well. So at this point, like I said, it goes off to BCD. They get to take a stab at it, or take a bite at the apple, as we like to say. And we don't know what they're going to come out with. Like I said in the beginning of this little video, we as a committee are very happy with what we put forward. I think we discussed things well, we met well, we came with facts, we backed up our arguments with facts, and we came to compromises where we had to. But in general, we're very happy with it, and I think that BCD will be happy with it as well. This code will go into place by January 1st, 2018. I just don't know what form it's going to be in at this point. It could be that we get Appendix Q as written with some of the modifications that we made. It could be that we get all of these pieces that we've asked for, that we can get the energy code, we can get some relief from the sprinkler head calculations and all those sorts of things. So very, very productive week. It was a very exciting couple of meetings. Great to see progress in the right direction, and we'll keep working at it. Thanks for listening to the whole video, and please share it with other people. Let people know what's going on out there. It's really important that people understand that there is a building code that you can use for tiny houses, and not just tiny houses on foundations. You can use this code today. Appendix Q can be used today. In most places you can refer to it, even if it hasn't been adopted, and say, this is what I want to do. And if you want to put it on a trailer, you go through section R104.11 and you get an engineered design to get that trailer recognized by the county or the city that you're working with. It's not as hard as you might think it is, but you have to use the right language and you have to use the right approach. So we're trying to lay that out for you. Hopefully we're getting some more clarity out there. And again, thanks for listening. Take care.